the haunted museum. It's strange how a place designed to preserve history, to teach, to showcase human achievement, can become a home for so many dark, twisted things. I remember the day I first heard about the haunted museum, and how I dismissed it as nothing more than a story, a myth born from years of whispered secrets and half-finished legends. But after everything that happened, I can tell you with certainty that there's nothing mythical about it. I never thought I'd find myself working in a museum. Museums were the kind of place I'd visit on school field trips, pretending to be interested in ancient fossils and dusty old paintings while counting the minutes until I could leave. I never saw them as anything more than repositories of the past, sterile, controlled environments where everything had its place and nothing unexpected ever happened. That's what I thought, at least before I ended up taking a job at the Holloway Museum of History. I had just graduated from college, struggling to find a job in a field I loved. So when I saw the ad for a curatorial assistant position at Holloway, I jumped at the chance. The museum had a reputation for its eclectic collections, ranging from ancient relics to more modern exhibits. It had been established over a century ago and was known for its rare and controversial acquisitions, like the human skull believed to be from a Native American shaman, or the cursed necklace said to bring misfortune to anyone who wore it. Some people even claimed that Holloway had pieces from famous haunted sites, like the Salem witch trials and the ruins of ancient castles in Europe. It seemed like the perfect place to start my career. On my first day, I was greeted by the museum's director, Mr. Holloway, an older man with graying hair and an air of cold professionalism. He didn't smile much, but there was something unsettling in his eyes. It wasn't just that they were sharp and calculating, there was something else there, something dark. But I figured it was just the weight of managing such a large historical institution. He gave me a brief tour of the museum, pointing out various exhibits and explaining their historical significance. The museum was divided into sections: ancient civilizations, medieval Europe, early American history, and so on. But there was one section that stood out to me: the basement. The basement was never open to the public. I asked about it, and Mr. Holloway's response was curt. "That's where we keep certain delicate items," he said, his tone growing colder. "Items that can't be exposed to the light of day. We keep them locked away down there. You don't need to worry about them." Naturally, that piqued my curiosity. I knew there had to be something in that basement, something important, perhaps even dangerous. But I was new and it was only my first day. I didn't want to press him further. The museum was a massive old building, full of creaking floors and high, imposing ceilings. The air smelled musty like old books and dust. But it was more than that. There was an undeniable sense of unease that seemed to hang in the air, as though the museum itself was alive and watching me. On my second week, I was asked to assist in cataloging some of the older pieces, relics that had been stored away in boxes, forgotten by most. Among the items, I found a small, intricately carved wooden box. It was beautifully crafted, with a pattern of swirling designs, but there was something wrong about it. I don't know how to explain it, but just looking at it made my skin crawl. It was as if the box was waiting for me to touch it, to open it. I brought the box to the director, Mr. Holloway, hoping he could shed some light on its origin. His face went pale the moment he saw it. "That's not meant for you," he said sharply, his voice trembling. "Put it down. Leave it be." I was taken aback by his reaction. "What's wrong with it?" "It's not important. Just leave it where it is." His strange behavior only made me more determined to learn about it. After a few days of trying to find out more on my own, I came across an old journal hidden in one of the museum's archives. It belonged to one of the museum's original curators, a man named Albert Holloway, the great-great-grandfather of Mr. Holloway. In the journal, I found an entry dated nearly a century ago, detailing the acquisition of the mysterious wooden box. Albert described it as an artifact too powerful to be displayed, and mentioned that it had been sealed away for its own safety. He wrote that the box had been disturbing for years, and that anyone who came into contact with it would suffer a terrible fate. He referred to it as the box of forgotten souls. At that point, my curiosity could no longer be contained. I had to find out more. That night, after everyone had left for the day, I made my way to the basement. The museum was eerily quiet, the only sounds the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. I descended the stairs, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. The basement was poorly lit, with only a few dim light bulbs hanging from the ceiling. I was careful to avoid making any noise, though I'm not sure why. It felt as if I wasn't alone. In the far corner of the basement, I found a large iron door, locked with a thick padlock. It had to be the room where they kept the dangerous items, the ones Mr. Holloway had warned me about. I couldn't resist. I took the key I had borrowed from his office and unlocked the door. Inside, the room was filled with old wooden crates, glass display cases, and shelves upon shelves of strange objects. I could barely make out the details of the items, but I could tell that some of them were unlike anything I had ever seen. But my eyes were drawn to one thing in particular, a dusty glass case sitting alone in the center of the room. Inside the case was a mannequin dressed in old clothes. It was a lifelike figure, though its features were strangely distorted, as though its face had been sculpted in an unnatural, grotesque way. Its eyes were wide open, staring out at nothing, but they didn't look like normal eyes. They were dull, like they had been drained of life. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread as I approached the case. Something was wrong with it. It was as if the mannequin was watching me, its eyes tracking my every movement. Then I heard it, a soft whisper. A voice, faint but clear, coming from somewhere behind me. "Get out." I spun around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. The room was empty, save for the objects in their cases. I laughed nervously, trying to shake off the growing sense of unease. But when I turned back to the mannequin, it was no longer in the same position. It had shifted ever so slightly, its head tilted in my direction. The whisper came again. "Get out, before it's too late." Panicked, I turned and ran for the door. I was just about to slam it shut behind me when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I spun around, but there was no one there. I didn't stop running until I was back in my apartment. That night, I locked all the windows and doors, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The following week, things started to get worse. People at the museum began to notice strange occurrences. Exhibits that hadn't been touched in years started to move on their own, and staff members reported hearing voices, whispers in the dead of night. But the worst of it happened when I returned to the basement to investigate the mannequin. When I opened the door, I froze in horror. The mannequin was gone. The case had been shattered, and all that was left was a pile of broken glass on the floor. But worse still was the faint, smeared outline of a figure, its arms outstretched, as though it had clawed its way out of the case. In the weeks that followed, the hauntings escalated. Every night, I would hear the whispers. Sometimes, I would see shadows moving in the corners of the museum, figures flickering just out of sight. And sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I would see the mannequin's face, twisted in agony, staring at me with those lifeless eyes. The museum had become a nightmare, a place haunted by the spirits of forgotten exhibits, objects that had once been part of our history, but now cursed by the souls they contained. It was no longer a place of learning or preservation. It had become a prison, a place where the past was not content to remain buried. And I was trapped in it, unable to escape. I tried to leave, but no matter how far I went, the museum's dark grip was always there, pulling me back. The spirits of the museum's former exhibits had found their way into the world, and they would not rest until they had claimed everyone who had disturbed them. I don't know how much longer I have before the museum takes me completely. But if you ever find yourself near Holloway Museum, I beg you don't go inside. Whatever you do, don't disturb the objects. Don't touch the exhibits, and most of all, don't go down into the basement. You'll hear the whispers, and when you do, you'll know it's already too late. The spirits of the museum will have found you. And once they do, there's no escaping.